The currents of the global job market have shifted with astonishing speed. Merely 6 months ago, the landscape was defined by a peculiar set of challenges. Back in what now seems like a distant era, the year 2024, a worker's primary concerns revolved around a lexicon of corporate anxieties. They navigated the treacherous waters of ghost jobs, quiet firing, and job washing. They practiced career cushioning against the backdrop of invisible overtime and application black holes. They wrestled with resentism, digital downsizing, and compensation compression, all while battling burnout attrition. And when all other strategies failed, they faced the grim reality of old-fashioned rolling layoffs. But today, that world is gone. The labor market is now grappling with an entirely new set of phenomena, each accompanied by its own freshly minted and equally absurd corporate buzzwords. New economic data, if we can still grant it our trust, is painting a bleak picture of how people are now finding, keeping, and advancing in their professional lives. And as you have likely surmised, many of these transformations are proving disastrous for younger workers, pushing young men in particular from a precarious position into an untenable one. In a stunning reversal of long-held economic truths, the unemployment rate among young male college graduates has, for the first time in recorded history, converged with that of their non-graduate peers. The proportion of unemployed individuals who are seeking their very first job has surged to a level not seen since 1988. And across the board, the engine of job mobility has ground to a halt. It's tempting to look at the headline unemployment rate and see a sign of stability. But that seemingly positive figure might be masking a much deeper, more troubling pathology within the system. As if this confluence of negative indicators were not enough, a new and startling reality is emerging. There is now a non-trivial probability that graduates with degrees in art history are earning more than you are. Ever since the dawn of advanced AI, you've likely come to suspect that your computer science degree was not the golden ticket you were promised. Today's new college graduates are not just facing a tough market, they are confronting the most hostile environment for entry-level employment in more than a decade. There is a grimly amusing, yet disturbingly accurate saying among veteran business analysts. If you want to identify an industry on the verge of catastrophic job insecurity, simply observe where the graduates of Ivy League institutions are flocking. For a time, it was the oil and gas behemoths, right before the oil crisis of the 1980s. Then, it was outsourcing operations, just prior to the Asian financial crisis. This was followed by early technology companies, which preceded the dot-com crash. Then came finance, which swelled with top talent right before the global financial crisis. And for the most recent decade, the destination has been big tech, which lavished enormous salaries on gifted graduates straight out of school. Of course, this analysis benefits greatly from hindsight. No industry can expand indefinitely, and it is entirely logical for young, ambitious graduates from elite schools to seek out the highest possible compensation, if only to begin chipping away at mountains of student debt. The core of the problem arises when the rest of the market observes these booming sectors. Everyone sees the potential for high earnings early in a career and rushes to acquire the necessary qualifications to enter those same fields. But by the time the majority has caught up, the boom has often passed. They find themselves overqualified for roles that are rapidly diminishing or have vanished entirely. For the last 10 years, the prevailing wisdom has been that anyone displaced from a factory job should simply learn to code. Before that, the mantra was that everyone should go and acquire an MBA. According to the Graduate Management Admissions Council, the year 2002, immediately following the dot-com implosion, marked the all-time peak for enrollment in postgraduate business programs, as professionals desperately sought a credential to restart their stalled careers. Today, the data suggests that this well-intentioned but ultimately flawed advice may now apply to the act of attending college itself, as the unemployment gap between graduates and non-graduates has closed. When this data was released, a flurry of articles proclaim the end of the higher education payoff. This is likely an oversimplification for the sake of a dramatic headline. While the trend is deeply concerning, two critical details must be understood before you consider rescinding a college admission. First, the fact that both groups share the same rate of unemployment does not signify the erasure of the college earnings premium. Being an unemployed qualified engineer is a fundamentally different economic position than being an unemployed, unskilled laborer. Even though an equal percentage of these two cohorts may be out of work, the average earnings of the college graduates who are employed remain substantially higher. Furthermore, it bears repeating that the unemployment rate is an exceptionally narrow statistic, one that receives far too much attention as a singular measure of economic health. To be officially counted as unemployed, an individual must be without a job and actively searching for one. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, approximately 72% of people holding a bachelor's degree or higher are currently active in the labor force, meaning they are either working or looking for work. While that number is declining annually, a trend we will address shortly, it is still vastly higher than the 56% of high school graduates who are engaged in the labor force. For those who did not complete high school, the figure is even lower. What this means is that despite the alarming new unemployment statistic, possessing a college degree still makes you significantly more likely to have a job and to have a higher paying job at that. But that is not the complete calculation. Degrees carry a substantial cost. Many are concluding that while high lifetime earnings are an attractive prospect, a smaller amount of money early in life, unburdened by debt, is preferable to more money later in life, saddled with colossal repayments from the moment a diploma is conferred. The undeniable trend is that with each passing year, the financial calculus of a college degree looks slightly worse. For any investment with a 40 or 50-year payoff period, that is a factor that demands sober consideration. That, however, is merely the statistical nuance of the graduate unemployment issue. The second, and far more significant point, is that this convergence in unemployment rates applies exclusively to men. For women with a college degree, the employment advantage over their non-graduate counterparts is lower than its historical peak, but it remains wide. In fact, the gap for women has been growing. At the precise moment, the gap for men has been vanishing. The question is, why? This strange divergence is the key that unlocks many of the other peculiar trends shaping the modern job market. A subtle but profoundly important shift has been documented in the payoff for changing jobs. It has long been established that workers who demonstrate excessive loyalty to a single company statistically earn far less over their lifetimes compared to those who strategically job hop for promotions and pay increases. That long-standing rule has now been broken. Over the last year, the financial benefit of switching employers has all but disappeared. Part of this is due to a general slowdown in wage growth across the entire economy. But a larger force is at play. The market is now actively incentivizing stasis. It is encouraging people to stay put and do absolutely nothing. Nobody is hiring. Nobody is voluntarily leaving their job. Nobody is pushing for a promotion. And nobody is taking any action that might expose them to the next wave of layoffs. Industry reports indicate that some professionals are even turning down new roles that represent clear career advancements, choosing instead to remain with a familiar company, in a role where they are past their probationary period and feel less vulnerable. This new stasis inadvertently benefits those in less volatile, boom-and-bust careers, such as individuals who pursued an arts degree. These professionals typically enter their fields driven by genuine passion, rather than the pursuit of a lucrative career path. They tend to take fewer career risks and remain in roles where they develop deep proficiency, making them far more difficult to replace than, say, generic business and commerce graduate number A3113. In prosperous times, this strategy is not the fastest path to wealth, but it has given them a significant head start on the tactic that everyone is now adopting: holding on to their job for dear life. This trend of clinging to existing roles has, inevitably, been given its own buzzword: job hugging. On its own, it's not a positive sign, especially when combined with the dismal data on new job creation. But it is the perfectly logical response of all parties involved when faced with escalating uncertainty. And this brings us back to the growing divide between young men and young women in the workplace. There is a great deal to unpack, but three key differences are driving this phenomenon. The first is a push to equalize gender balance that has been applied unevenly across the economy. The focus has been on integrating women into male-dominated fields that require a college degree, such as STEM and business management. There has not been a comparable push to integrate women into unskilled male-dominated fields, like the trades and manual labor. Women in STEM has been a major focus of government programs, corporate initiatives, and university enrollment campaigns for decades. This effort has been highly successful in opening up these fields to a broader talent pool. The direct consequence is that men in these degree-required fields are now competing against a much larger base of qualified candidates than they did in the past. And the simple reality is that there is a finite number of these jobs available. Simultaneously, men in roles that do not require a college degree have not experienced a similar surge in competition. This is not a new development. Before the pandemic distorted much of the data, male college graduates had an unemployment rate of around 5%, while their non-graduate peers were at 6%. Female college graduates, at that same time, had an unemployment rate of around 3%. But their non-graduate peers were also at 6% unemployment, meaning the advantage conferred by a degree was much wider for women. It's crucial to note that there have been programs designed to attract men into historically female-dominated graduate fields, particularly nursing, aged care, and elementary school teaching. By and large, these initiatives have been less successful. There are several reasons for this. Frankly, a social stigma persists. A woman who lands a role as an engineer or a corporate executive is seen as a symbol of empowerment. A man who becomes a nurse is often still the butt of a joke, and a male elementary school teacher can be the target of suspicion. This absolutely should not be the case, and attitudes are improving, but it is disingenuous to pretend this bias does not exist. The second reason is that, historically, these roles have not offered the same level of compensation as male-dominated professions. Men have generally been drawn to more lucrative careers, either from a perceived need to support a family, or simply because high income was what they valued. The job market has changed far more quickly than these cultural expectations. This is why many men continue to seek out traditionally prestigious jobs, which are now in a downturn. This gap reflects a new reality. Safe, stable careers like nursing are thriving in a difficult economy, thanks in part to an aging population. Meanwhile, we are on the trailing edge of a boom in trendy jobs that paid extremely well in a better economic environment. This also explains why unemployment among non-college educated men has remained relatively stable. Fields like construction, the trades, and other semi-skilled occupations have been bolstered by increased home building and infrastructure projects. You can also see the severe impact on this group after the construction slowdowns that followed the global financial crisis, an event that was not nearly as damaging to their college-educated peers. These differences also harm women in the workforce. When women do enter trendy fields like technology, they tend to fare worse during periods of downsizing. A study of the recent tech layoffs that swept the industry found that women accounted for 44% of job losses, while representing only 28% of the workforce. The companies involved did not release comprehensive data explaining their layoff decisions, but there are generally three explanations for this disparity. The first is that these companies, despite hiring for gender parity, may have segregated genders within different departments. They often hired more women for roles in HR, marketing, corporate culture, and internal development. Coincidentally, these are the first departments to be cut when a company downsizes. The second explanation is that in some ways, cultural expectations work in favor of men. They are often perceived as the breadwinner supporting a family, whereas a girl boss is viewed as more likely to land on her feet. This is another clear example of a bias that should not influence employment decisions, but it persists. Women are consistently judged more harshly than men in high-performing roles. Unfortunately, this judgment can often come from other women, who are disproportionately represented in departments like HR, which hold significant influence over layoff decisions. The third, and most crude explanation, is that hiring practices which prioritized a diversity objective over selecting the absolute best person for the job may have favored individuals who would underperform relative to their peers. Consequently, when performance-based layoffs were conducted, these individuals were more likely to fall below the cutoff for retention. It is no secret that many culturally forward companies have executed a hard 180-degree turn on these initiatives over the last year. It is vital to acknowledge these realities when examining these issues, because whether they should or not, they will have a significant impact on everyone's career. One of the best things to do with this information is to use it to your advantage. Despite the stigma, one of the safest groups from trouble in the job market are men in previously female-dominated fields. Sectors like healthcare already boast a low unemployment rate, and men often find it particularly easy to secure these roles due to the practical reality that they can more easily perform much of the physical labor these jobs entail. This phenomenon was dubbed the glass elevator effect as far back as 1992 in an article from the University of Texas. The study found that men often progressed much more easily in these roles. And even though initial salaries were lower compared to male-dominated fields, after accounting for the higher chance of career progression, the lifetime earnings often shifted back in their favor. Obviously, do not choose a career based on a video you watched on the internet. Healthcare and teaching are serious, demanding professions. But also, do not let some business school ideologue talk you out of it, because the chances are you will end up earning more than them in the long run. Go and watch this video next to find out how we forgot what professionalism even means in the modern workplace. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to keep on learning how money works.